Hello, and welcome to the Awaken Your Abundance program. This program has been created by the Early Birds Club, a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing transformation through the use of the subtle morning hours to set the tone of the day. Awaken Your Abundance is EBC's signature program that offers participants a 7-month, step-by-step guide into awakening abundance through deep inner work. We are so excited to have Dolf Zantinge as our guest speaker for this episode. Dolf has a background in IT and telecommunications with a specialization in fiber optics, and he has been a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence. He has dedicated the past 2 decades to studying the interaction of water with electromagnetic fields and biophotonics. His groundbreaking insights into water's incredible ability to hold and transmit information is opening new doors for innovation and highlighting its potential to restore balance in unforeseen ways, bridging ancient wisdom with cutting-edge science. Dolph, thank you so much for being here with us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. And thank you for this beautiful introduction.
Dolph, could you share with our viewers how you got into research on water? What inspired your interest in the study of water?
Well, to be honest, you already mentioned the beginning of my previous life when I did a lot of work in the field of artificial intelligence and fiber optics. You can only do artificial intelligence when you talk about data. You have information and then you collect it and you have to order it. That's one. The other world I went to is fiber optics, and fiber optics is transferring data with light. And then you transmit millions of bytes, but you do it with light. And these two things came together for me because I was wondering, can the body also transfer light? And what is then the effect in the data into your body? And that was the study at the beginning. And then finally, after already 1 or 2 years, we found out that the most critical area and the element that is really transporting all of this information into a body is water. And then I thought, hey, that is interesting. So I made some phone calls with some scientists in the world. Can you tell me a little bit more about water? And the answer was very simple. They said, we haven't got a clue. Because everybody talks about water, oh, just a simple element. But then I had to dive into the element of water, and then I found out that it's a mystery. It is really a mystery. And step by step, I was able to enter a part of that mystery.
Wow. So what are the qualities of water that make it so essential to life? And here, in addition to its importance to our biology, please also talk about its impact on the psyche, if you can.
Sure. Well, I try to give you a little bit more background then upon water. Everybody is, when you ask people what is water, they immediately say it's H2O. Yes. And that's it. But there is much more involved. Take, for instance, snow. If you look to snow, it has a crystal form. But almost every snow flock is different. Who is doing that? How is that possible? How is it that the world, Mother Nature, knows exactly what to do with it? And water was also becoming a very interesting subject in the world of science, because water is one of those fluids that doesn't belong to mother physics at the moment. I'll give you one example. Normally in the world of physics, if something is cooling down, it becomes heavier. But when you cool down water, you get ice and it is floating on water. Everybody accepts it, but nobody understands how it is possible. And so there are more than a large number of rules that are different in water. And then it is very interesting to study it in more detail. And then you find out that water absorbs information. And that is something that is completely new in the world of science, but not in the world of certain tribes in the world. They do know that you can communicate with water. And then suddenly you see that there is a bridge between those two worlds. And we try to close a part of that bridge.
Could you say a bit more about, so you were studying water and you realized there's this whole field out there that is completely undiscovered. You discovered that there are people who have known about this quality of water. S- So, can you talk a bit about that journey of really understanding what it is that differentiated water? Because nobody had gone into that structural aspect of water that does this.
Yeah, let me first go to the world of science, how it all started, and then I moved later on to the world of yeah, more energy, etc. But in the world of science, what did we do? For instance, we had extremely sensitive cameras that were able to pick up light, and they could read light from a candle on 20 miles difference. So the sensitivity of those cameras were amazing. And then we were using those cameras to measure what will happen if you have, for instance, just simple seeds and you give those seeds water. And what we saw was an explosion of light. But then we also saw that the light was different if you have different types of water. If you have polluted water, or you have mineral water, or different types of water coming from different areas in the world, the light was different. And then we said, hey, how is that possible? And they could say, oh, it has to do with the pollution or the minerals. No, it was really different. It was so different that we saw that there was a communication taking place. We saw that the lights of the seeds were going to communicate. And that really changed my life. I saw there is a whole communication field that we are not aware of. And water is a part of that communication field. And then I thought, why has nobody told me this before? In the world of biology, nobody knows this. Because even in the world of biology, they simply say, oh, this is just water. And then I had to dive into the water science, and then you come into a completely different world. And then finally, you find out that some of those things were described in old scriptures, very old scriptures, also from India. And then you see already that the water is working with light and the sun and the planets. And we know that, for instance, take, for instance, the fact that we have high and low tide. The oceans go up and go down. Yes. And then we also do know, for instance, in India, you have the famous Kumbh Mela every 12 years. That is typically something that belongs to India. They do know that a river can really be holy. And holy means it has a certain energy layer that can transform you. And they know that if the planets are there, then it can change you. And that is where I move from the world of science to, sorry, from the world of science to the world of, yeah, call it spirituality.
So that's fascinating, and I actually wanted to ask you a question further down about this. Not only the River Ganga, but there's so many places across the world. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit over here. I really want to come to that question. It's so juicy. Um, I want to talk a bit about this connection between light and water because you said that was the meeting point of where you started from studying fiber optics and information through light. You started studying water and you noticed this correlation between that, that explosion of life and light, that connection. Could you talk a bit more about that, this connection between light and water?
Yes, if we use water in a laboratory and we first put it into the sun, or we used full moon or new moon, then we saw in the light's effects of biological systems a different effect. And that was purely due to the fact that the water has stored this information. And that was really amazing. We could suddenly see in our laboratory the high and the low tide coming back when you gave the seas the right water. And if the water was not of that high quality, then we could hardly measure the low and high tide. But when it was really the right water, and we call it later on, we call it coherent water, then we could see that we could really follow in every hour exactly the relationship between the moon and the water in the laboratory.
Wow. So could you talk a little bit more about what this coherence means, for our audiences, just to understand what coherence is in water?
Coherence in water means that it can absorb a structure of information that is coming from outside. And coherence means that between the atoms, there is a certain relationship built up, can be in the form of a crystal, can be in another form of communication system. But suddenly, then the water is able to communicate with the outside world in an optimal way. So it can really absorb this information like a computer system. Suddenly, you have a computer with a large memory, so you can store it all. But nowadays, most waters don't have that memory anymore. But if you can really bring it back into a kind of organization structure whereby I can store the data and it can remain in this structure, then we talk about coherent water.
And what form does this coherence take? So what is the medium through which this transfer of data happens?
That took us multiple years to find out what is coherence, and there are different types of coherence. And we found out that you can only bring in the coherent on specific time frames and through specific devices and forms that had nothing to do with electricity or with crystals, nothing to do. It had to. You have to awaken it again, to open it again. That is a very specific way, and that was found in very old books how to do that. From books that even came from the Himalayas.
Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, we had some insights, and we saw that, for instance, if you have a cascade, a waterfall, then you do see that at the end of the cascade, when the water is falling down, that it has a different effect below when you measure it into the laboratory than when the water before it falls down. So you do know that water has an effect with oxygen, etc., etc. But these are the chemical forms. But there is also an energetic form, and that energetic form is typically that belongs to water. And then suddenly you made a move not only to the chemical world, but there is an electromagnetic world, and water responds to electromagnetic fields. And if you find out that that is the case, then you know that there are certain periods in a year whereby that situation is optimal. And then you have to respond to that. And then you have to know how to bring that back into the water again. It's quite a journey. It's not simple. And you have to take out a part of your scientific mind because you have to go to your intuition.
That's what I was trying. That's one of the things that occurred to us actually. That it's not very much part of the observable world easily, and just bridging that gap between what is physically and chemically observable or quantifiable, and how do you make that jump to this understanding. And you're saying that it was also this very spiritual side of you, this other search that kind of led to bridging that. How did that work with the scientific aspect?
Well, as a matter of fact, I think we made a mistake in the world. I think we did split up. We made this world a chemical world and a material world without understanding that it is all based upon frequencies and vibrations and quantum fields. It's all there. There it starts in the vacuum field. We do know that in the world of physics, especially in the world of quantum physics, but we forget to translate it to our current world. So if you do see what's happening now also in the world of science, we do understand that we do not understand a lot of things that take place in the world of physics. But in the world of quantum physics, it becomes more clear that many of the answers are there. And we still have a gap between those two worlds. So you have to close the gap. So for me, the world of science is a limited world. And I hope that we can make the jump together as humanity to the other world as well. I think that's also a more harmonic world and a more peaceful world. So I hope we move in that.
Can you talk a bit about how this whole area of bridging this possibility and this field of potential with what you're seeing, and how it's kind of in the space uh, that other scientists haven't caught up, but you know that this potential exists?
Well, we found it out in our laboratory. It was quite simple, and we could not answer the questions they had with our current scientific background. And we had a big team. We had a quite big team of physicists, biologists, doctors, everybody. And then we found out that a lot of this was known by, for instance, local Indian tribes or other things. Yes. And so we did a lot of tests in those areas as well. And we built our own equipment to see, is there a communication going on between different worlds? And at a certain level, it was so obvious that that is going on. And that was for us the reason that we say, no, we have to get a little bit more understanding of the other world before we can really have an answer on what water is in this world. And the answer is not 100% there yet, but we made a serious jump forward, I think.
Wonderful. Um, so I'm going to jump ahead to this question. The scientific community has very stringent ideas of what constitutes scientific study. How has your work been received in the wider community?
Well, as a matter of fact, I gave a few years ago for a whole team of scientists in Stanford University and in nearby San Francisco a lecture. There were 200 scientists there, and they all understood that the world of science has limitations as it is now. And they really welcome this. They really want to talk about it. There is a great need in the world of science also to have an open discussion upon the other areas. But I'm sometimes very disappointed in the world of science. They make it a kind of strict religion. If it doesn't fit in that protocol, then it doesn't exist, and that's not true. You have to be completely open-minded. So what you just said is absolutely true. We still cannot measure the other world. We don't have the equipment. And then for a lot of people, they say it doesn't exist. That's not true. It's probably even more true than this world.
So there's a bit of a dichotomy, because within the community there's this hunger for knowing more, and this desire to kind of break out of a very rigid, sort of very defined set of protocols that one can view things from. Is it more of because we don't see this? You're talking about having presented this to scientists, and they were very open and received it, but we don't see this in the mainstream,
No,
what we get to see.
no, that has also to do with the world we live in. Our world we live in is very much based upon a lot of big companies that want to sell the products, etc., etc. But I give you one background information. If all the things that I discussed with you now, if that would be absorbed in, for instance, the health industry, then you have a huge change going on. And not everybody is waiting for that.
That's true. I understand what you're saying. You're talking about health. I want to come back to the human body and what you've noticed about how water works here. Um, we understand that it's essential for the optimal functioning of the body, our organ health. We understand that it's what transports nutrients to our cells, carries away toxins, bridges the functioning of various organs through blood, through the lymphatic system, etc. But there is now this other layer that you're talking about of carrying information. And we don't see this, but how can you talk a bit about how one can sort of, you know, go into that aspect of how water is, because water is about 60 to 70% of our bodies. That is our own makeup.
Well, I'm going to challenge that because everybody is telling you that we are 70% water. That's not really true. That is our body weight. In reality, we are more than 90% water molecule. Yes. And it's quite strange because we go to the doctor with only that percentage that has nothing to do with water. But the reality is that everything is communicating via the water, the blood, the cells, the whole transport system is working with water. So if your water is not in balance, then a part of your electromagnetic field, and your body has an electromagnetic field, cannot function properly. So what we did is that we did a large number of tests on animals and on humans to give them water and what we called coherent water for months. And then we saw that the blood level was changing. A lot of things were taking place in the blood. The urine was changing. And we could see that you become much more healthy. So the body suddenly started to respond. We also noticed that if people are going to walk in the sun and they have a lot of coherent water into the body, then we could see that the effect became even stronger. So we constantly see that water and light is an ongoing communication system. So we did a lot of measurements. We did measurements upon aging. We did measurements on microbiome. All those things were taking place, and we could see the effects. That is what we do. I mean, what we constantly do is that we do know that water is communicating with a different level of energy that we hardly can measure with our current laboratory equipment. But we always did tests that we could find out in a laboratory what are the results on the chemical world and on the biological world, and that's something we could measure. So we could also always measure the final effect.
Okay. And this we keep coming back to this water and light, this relationship between water and light. So you're saying that just on its own, even coherent water is something that requires the light of the sun to really make that effect of it blossom in your system,
Not only the sun, also the moon.
which is reflected light from the sun.
Yes, but it is a different light.
Could you talk more about that, please?
We saw that in a laboratory, we saw that there was an ongoing rhythm in the, we did those measurements, by the way, in the field of agriculture. We did thousands of tests. And we saw that when the moon was full, or we had new moon or half moon, we could see the effects in the electromagnetic fields into the soil and into the seeds. And if you have different type of water, what we call then the coherent water, and coherence means in this case also that it was bringing all those parts of biology together, it really made it coherent, working together. And then suddenly we saw that not only the seeds were changing, they got more light, but also the taste was different. And the fruit became much better. And we didn't use fertilizer anymore. Everything changed. The whole system changed. And then you see something, and that is so important to understand, that we are creating a world that is completely out of order. There is an intelligence around us that is much, much bigger than we are aware of. And we don't use that intelligence. We simply change it with material products and chemical products. But if you really are going to see how Mother Nature works, then it is so amazing intelligent. We can hardly describe it.
So what you're saying is that access to this intelligence, and here you talk about the inherent intelligence in nature.
Yeah.
You're saying that we can access this not only through going into subtle practices or through what we call spiritual practices, but also through our interactions, our with the elements. You're saying that water is a way of accessing this intelligence or this subtlety. Uh,
You understand? Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
wow. Can you say more about that?
How many hours do you have? If you really start to understand the intelligence of each element, by the way, take, for instance, polluted soil. Yes, you think, hey, that is an element, that is the earth. But even if it is polluted, thousands of years later, it might be back in harmony. How is that possible? Well, that has to do with there is an intelligence in harmony that knows how to do it. It can take thousands of years, can take 10,000 of years, yes. But if you really are creating a situation whereby all the elements work together, then you see that is what I told you. I saw in the laboratory, I saw that suddenly there was a light coming through, and I saw that the light was communicating with each other as if it was a language. So for me, suddenly I saw there was a language going on, a cosmic language, and nobody knows how that language works. But suddenly you think, hey, there is something much bigger going on than I'm aware of. And then the next day, you saw that the seeds were blossoming and there were things going on. And that had nothing to do with the chemical world. The outcome is chemical, but the beginning was an electromagnetic communication system with an intelligence behind it. And that is probably the fifth element, the ether element, the vacuum. And there's a lot of knowledge over there. So that is why I think it's very important that the world of science getting is, is getting in that direction. We have to make clear to ourselves that we are part of it. And we really took ourselves, we stepped out of it. And we have to come back to it.
Yeah, and how would, say, a layperson like me have access to that coherence in water? You're saying, so for instance, you studied it in waterfalls and you noticed that the quality and the information held in water was different at the top and it was different once it reached the bottom with that movement, light, everything, the interaction. How can I do that at home?
Well, what we do now, and I'm not going to start a sales program, but we do know now that we can make water coherent and it remains coherent. There are a lot of types of coherence. Some people make water coherent with a crystal, for instance, or with another device. Most of the time, that coherence is gone in a few minutes. Yes. To keep it coherent for longer periods, that means that you really have to go and really understand water. Before we have coherent water, it will take a year. But with that coherence, you can make other water very fast coherent in just a few seconds. Because water wants to be in a coherent state. Yes. The whole nature wants to be in a coherent state. And that is the danger at this moment. We create a world whereby there is less coherence. That is why this, for instance, this Zoom meeting is very important to let the people know, be aware, we can move to a coherent state. And we have to work on that. We have to do our homework. We have to understand that this is important. This is part of us.
Thank you, Dolph. That is a very important reminder. And I think in some ways people are moving in those directions, but it's a very um, it's always considered in that subtle, more spiritual, more mystical realm. And what you're saying here is it isn't mystical. There is no gap between what we consider mystical and what we consider scientific.
That's
You're
it.
saying literally that that bridge exists.
Yes,
Uh, and there's a very tangible way of connecting the two.
yes.
Um, Could you talk a bit more about, the impact that you've seen on, you said that you've studied its impact on the nervous system, on the microbiome. Um, could you talk a bit more about that? Because the microbiome is such a big topic these days, and it's connected with so many disorders, whether it's autism spectrum disorder or a host of other conditions that we as humans are increasingly facing or noticing.
It's an important question because it's completely right with what you say. More than 10 years ago, we were already testing on biome into the soil. Be aware that a lot of the microbiome that we have in our gut is coming from the soil. But we were not able to measure the microbiome for more than 10, 15 years ago due to the latest DNA and computer technology, because it takes a lot of computer science to do that calculation. Now we have that knowledge. And then suddenly we found out that there are more than 1,200 types of bacteria into your gut. And 20 years ago, we thought, oh, there are only maybe 10 of them. No, there are 1,200 of them. And now we also mentioned that our gut is our second brain. Why is that? Because there is a direct nerve center, nervus vagus, that is connecting direct the brain to the gut. There is a direct communication system. And that is why the microbiome responds immediately to your mental system, but also to your social behavior, everything. And then suddenly food becomes very important. Now, what we have seen is that the food that we are consuming now needs a kind of coherence as well. But if we are going to eat only food that is under the influence of all kinds of local toxins, then we get it as well into our body. So this communication in our body between the gut and the brain is really critical, and it is important. And water is playing a major role there.
So you're saying that it can be used, coherent water can be used therapeutically for a host of conditions.
What we are going to do is that, and that is a test that we have done multiple times, we are going to use this water in agriculture. And we have seen the effects. Seeds are much more powerful. You need hardly any toxins in agriculture, or none, even better. Taste is becoming better. Everything is better.
So the water is not only, it's not only as water itself healing you, it's also healing the soil and therefore your food.
Very simple. If you do that, it's going to affect all the elements because the elements work together. So if you have the good element of water, then you can create a good element of earth. If the earth is in good shape, then you get good air. And then you need the fire, the sun, to make it all blossom and work together with the moon.
And according to yoga, this is all existing within our bodies as well, the earth, fire.
That's it. We are simply a microcosmos.
Have you heard of the term blue mind state? It was coined by the biologist Dr. Wallace Nichols to describe the soothing and balancing effect of being around water bodies. Have you noticed this? So one is the actual interaction of water with our system or our soil, whether it's external or internal systems, but even just the effect of being near water bodies. Have you studied that impact as well or noticed anything?
We noticed it, yes. As a matter of fact, water, if you are living in a water area, then you also find out that water is absorbing a lot of those energies as well. And people are more healthier.
Even if that water is maybe a contaminated body, but its
Well,
interaction with.
that's a different story. I talk about normal water. Now, if it is contaminated, then it can have a negative effect on you as well. And you have to go too deep. But do understand that water is a communication system that is going through the entire world, because although you think you see water into a pond or something, or in a lake, there is also water in the field of the soil, because it's an all communication system. So if water is polluted in a specific area, then the pollution can go much further and further due to the communication. And that is one of the major items we work on at the moment. Because if the water in this world is going to be more and more polluted, and you can have chemical pollution, but there are now also different types of pollutions, then the whole communication system on the entire planet can stop. And then we have a serious issue.
And that pollution is ramping up quite a bit now. Can you talk about that, please?
Now, that has to do also with my background in the telco world, because in the telco world, we use now wireless systems and mobile phones. And what is happening now is that we introduced all kinds of antennas that have beam frequencies 7 times 24 all over the world. And we are going to bring in more and more different type of frequencies, and also satellites. As a matter of fact, we have more than 10,000 satellites already beaming all kinds of waves to this planet. And we are bringing it up to 100,000 within a few years. All of that information, because that's information, all of that information is stored in water. But it is creating a pollution into the water because it takes out the coherence. Then the communication system is unlocked. For a lot of people, they think, oh, this is really stupid, but it ain't. We did a lot of tests in laboratories, in very important water laboratories all over the world. And we could see that harmful bacteria were growing tremendously if beam this frequency into water. That is why it is so important that we start to understand upon the negative effects upon it. So for me, it's very important to tell the story to the world and to show the people what the effects are. Because if you are going to eat food that is constantly under this influence, then your body is going to respond to that as well.
I mean, we already see an impact of pollution in a lot of ways on our psyche, our emotional, mental well-being. And we're still drawing those bridges, but this kind of creates an even more tangible bridge.
I'll give you one example. What is the most fluid part in your body? That are your brains. Your brains are almost completely water. But you also have a memory. And everybody says, oh, the memory is here. But there is also a memory in water. Maybe there might be a connection. I'm not going into too much detail there now, but okay. If you put your mobile phone to the water and it is beaming this information and you eat the wrong food on a daily, well, this is water, then you create a very interesting situation in the water into your brain. The effect will be there. And that is what we have seen with brainwaves. We did measure brainwaves, and we could see the effect already after 20 seconds.
We have our phones with us all the time.
That's it. That's it.
Wow. There's so much to unpack over here. And I know that this conversation could go on forever, and we would not even unpack half of what you have to share with the world, Dolf. Can you tell us a bit about how your personal relationship with water has changed and what changes have you made in your life after, your journey to this point?
It really changed my life. I mean, I was a very open-minded man before I started to do this research, but due to the effects that I saw in the laboratory and all the scientists I met and the effect I see in Mother Nature, uh, I first of all became very grateful that I was allowed to do this research. But the second thing is I became very much aware that the current world of science is moving completely in the wrong direction. And we have to bring it in such a way that we don't show any aggression or anything. We have to tell the people, listen, there is another world, and we have to listen to that world, because I think that is the solution. And so in that respect, I'm grateful that I can bring a part of that message, only just a part of it. But the knowledge I found in water, the depth of the elements, because I found that water has a level of consciousness. And I don't move into too much detail there now, otherwise we have another discussion of 1 hour. But then you think, oh, I know nothing. I really don't know anything. This is so profound that you can hardly imagine what it is. And it will be grateful for people if we really move in that direction. What a change would that be?
So, how can I, standing here today, use this world of knowledge that you've opened up to enhance that relationship with the water element in my life?
I think the very first step is that you create an awareness. Yes. And the questions you raise show me that you have an awareness. You think, hey, this makes sense. That's the very first step. And then you start to make the relationship with Mother Nature, with the food you eat, with your social behavior, with your surrounding, with Mother Nature, with all the things we do. And then suddenly your awareness becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the communication starts with others. And then you find out, hey, there is a certain type of coherent water. You want to use that, and you feel suddenly the difference. Not at the beginning, some do, but not for everybody. But step by step, you start to understand, hey, this is so important. This can really help me to change my life. And I hope that we move with a lot of people in that direction in a very short time frame.
I'm with you, Dolph. um, Dolph, I want to talk about the fact that there are so many water bodies across the world, and I'm coming back to this. We brought it up in the beginning of our conversation. There are lakes, wells, springs, rivers that are considered sacred across the world. Long ago, well before it was possible to even study the physical properties of water, people recognized these as therapeutic and even healing waters. And some examples are the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes, France, the waters that have been deemed miraculous, as well as the River Ganga. Have you had a chance to test any of these waters?
Many, many times, almost on a daily basis. Because a lot of people send them to laboratories, but they only measure, is there a change in the minerals or is there a change in the H2O or something? But it has nothing to do with that. Nothing. It has to do with a change in the electromagnetic field that is changing the crystalline form of the water. And then you see that water is absorbing data. And that data is then transported to your body. And that is going to give a change into you. Because your body is filled with data, ongoing. Even you and I now, when we talk, there's a whole data system around us that keep us alive. Yes. but that data must be ordered in a certain frequency, in a certain coherent state as well. And if you have the right water, and if the water is absorbed with that data in the right way, then it can have a huge effect upon health immediately. I mean, this is already so complex for a lot of people, but there are, for instance, water forms that are better for male than for female or for certain diseases. So there are different types of frequencies.
Wow. So, so these waters, you've had the opportunity to test some of these waters, and please bear with me. I really want to go a little bit deeper into this. um, what have you seen that's different? Because, as you know, at least in India, I know that the river Ganga has been polluted so much, and yet, its properties are just something that so many sages have talked about through the years. Books have talked about through the years. People have had experiences over the years. Can you talk about what you noticed? I know that you said that there's a whole different electromagnetic, impact or the information that it's carrying, but what does that mean in tangible terms? What have you noticed?
Okay. What you do see is that if for instance you have a lake, yes, it depends where is the lake, what is the area of the lake, yes, because the water is communicating with all the electromagnetic fields around it, and it can hold those fields, yes. And Mother Ganga, born in the Himalayas, and the Himalayas have a very specific electromagnetic field, and it can hold that field for the whole area. If at that moment of time it is on a specific place in India, on a specific time frame of the year, with a specific frequency from the moon and the sun, then really it is giving a boost to the crystalline form or another form into that water, and it remains there. Yes. And that is what those people have seen and tested. And from a scientific point of view, you only see the chemicals in the water. This is a different world. But if you use that water and you are going to work with light in a laboratory, then suddenly you see a different effect in the light. So there is another energy in that water than normal water. So I wanted to make it also a little bit scientific in this area. You can measure it scientifically if you have specific tools.
And what's the difference between the water from Ganga and the water from Lotus? Are there differences?
They're different. Yes, they're absolutely different. Yes. Yes. Mother Ganga is also different a month from now or 2 months from now. Yes. It also had to do with the seasons. And it also had to do with the moon and the sun and other planets as well. Yes. So suddenly you see that this whole communication system is also coming from outside. It is not a system only here. Now there is a lot of communication system coming from outside. There is an ongoing system. But very unfortunate for one of the most intelligent beings on this planet, called human beings, they have locked themselves in a very, very, very small part of their brain, and that they forgot that they are part of that system as well.
That is one of the things actually that is the mainstay of our program. This understanding of abundance comes from connection with nature. There is no other abundance.
Yes. But we have to learn the lessons of nature. We think that nature is the lessons we learn in the world of biology in our books. No, there is a whole communication system and a whole intelligence system behind that. And all those elements work together, also in your body. You are a part of this whole microcosmos. You are a part of that. So I hope we move in that direction.
I hope so too, Dolph, really. Uh, Thank you so much. This has been such an incredible conversation. I feel like this is just part one of a long series. Dolph, what final message would you like to share with viewers about the importance of connecting with water
Well,
and nature?
my final words would be it would be fantastic if we really open ourselves and move in that direction. And I think we have to do it fast. And we really have to be aware about what we are doing with Mother Nature. Don't underestimate the negative forces that are also taking place. We have to survive on this planet. And it is a beautiful planet. And we can even make it more beautiful. Where are we waiting for? And get rid of our limited thinking. That would be the message.
Thank you so much, Dolph. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing this. And I feel like we've just not even touched the tip of the iceberg with this conversation. I mean, forget about all the research that is still remaining in your entire domain. I feel like even from what you know, there's so much more. Um, and we look forward to taking this conversation forward at some point. I have a feeling this is not the end.
Okay. You're more than
But
welcome.
thank you so much for joining us today. Um, and we hope to see you back here.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.